Hi, I'm Holly with Stella Quilts, and today I thought we would talk about a couple terms in quilting, the partial seam and the Y seam. Both of these terms were a bit daunting to me when I first started quilting, so I thought it would be good to discuss them and kind of alleviate some of that concern and fear around them. So let's dive in and we'll just go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and start with the partial seam. The partial seam is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a seam that's only partially sewn, and then you finish it off when you're done later down the road. So I'm laying out just a sample block, and for this you can see that the center piece is smaller than the pieces that are going to be attached to it. This is where we would use that partial seam. So our first seam is going to be this to this, and we're only going to sew down part way across that block. I'm going to go ahead and open that up and just finger press. And then I'm going to add the next piece. Now that all of the three sides are sewn together, I have this partially sewn seam here that we need to finish sewing it down. So now we'll just turn it in. And I could have sewn a little bit further on that partial seam. But that's still then a straight seam as you're sewing and finishing it off. So then you have your finished block. Now, if this was a real block, I would have been a little bit more precise in my piecing and making sure I pressed, but that's what it would end up looking like. The reasons for using this method can be reducing bulk. So this same layout could be achieved by doing a 9 patch where you have the same fabrics next to each other to create these extended sashings. But then you would have an additional seam here that does add bulk. This method then reduces some of that bulk in the piecing. So just pros and cons to it. There really is no con to this, just a preferred method, as well as depending on what pattern design you're using. If you're using a pattern, this could be a method that is applied in that process. Partial seam could also be used in adding some sashings on some quilts. I do have a pattern that we'll be doing a video on shortly called the diamond weave, and to add some of the sashing, it uses partial seams to be able to make it all work at the very end. But that's the partial seam. Moving on to the Y seam. The Y seam is given this name because it is for seams where 3 seams are coming together and none of them make a straight line. So we're going to work with these hexagons to demonstrate that. So you can see here that it makes a Y shape where the 3 come together and there's no straight line here. This also could be utilized where you're using diamonds to make a star instead of using half square triangles. But let's go ahead and get started on this. Some templates for Y seams will have markings on them at the corners where you can draw the dots to know where your 1/4 inch seam is. I don't have any of those kinds of tools. So if I'm going to do a Y seam, I will just draw on the back of my fabric and figure out where that marking is. So I'm putting my ruler down so that I'm measuring a 1/4 inch from the edge of my fabric, so I know where my seam line is. And I'm just going to do a small marking near the corners. And where my markings intersect, that spot is my start and stop point for my 1/4 inch seams. Then we'll just go ahead and, doesn't really matter which order I put these together because this is just an example, but we'll go ahead and we'll take 2 sides and we'll just sew between our lines from this point to that point, using that intersection as our start and stop. So I like to just put my needle down right through that intersection. That's my first one. Then I'm going to add into my next section. And then now that I've got those 2 sides done, it's time to do the last side here. So I'm going to just kind of fold place. You may want to do a little bit of back stitching, maybe 2 stitches of back stitching at each one of these start and stop points. If you're going to be machine quilting, the quilting is going to help keep everything pressed down, so it's not as critical, but it could certainly help in the process depending on how large the project is. But that's the Y seam all finished. So it's just a lot of short seams versus longer ones. Again, this is used for odd shapes like the hexagon, where you've got 3 points coming together, but there's no straight line. Or if you wanted to reduce bulk by having less seams in a star, then you could use the Y seam as well and use diamonds instead of half square triangles. But that's the Y seam. I hope this helped. So that's how you do a partial seam or a Y seam. I hope this helped to explain what those terms are and dispel some of the anxiety or nervousness about approaching them. I know that they were daunting for me just to learn, but once I got it, it made sense, and it really wasn't as big of a deal as I was making it out to be in my head. So I hope that's the case for you as well. Please leave your comments. Tell me how you're doing with these 2 techniques, and have a great day and happy quilting.